Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Andrew Langlois, and today I'll be discussing ethical hiring practices in social work using the case study provided for the assignment. This case highlights several ethical and legal issues that can occur during the hiring process when an interviewer moves away from evaluating an applicant's qualifications. As social workers and future leaders, we have a responsibility to make sure hiring decisions are fair, professional, and based on a person's ability to perform. During this presentation, I'll discuss what questions are appropriate during an interview, the interpersonal skills social workers need to work with diverse clients, recommendations for ethical hiring, the NASW Code of Ethics violations in Maria's interview, how Maria could respond professionally, and what organizations can do to make sure their hiring practices follow ethical standards and employment law. Maria is a recent social work graduate interviewing for a case manager position with a nonprofit organization that serves diverse communities. Like most applicants, she probably expected the interview to focus on her education, previous experience, and whether she had the knowledge and skills needed to do the job. Instead, the interview quickly moved away from those topics. The director asked Maria about her marital status, whether she planned to have children, and what her religious beliefs were. He also questioned whether someone with her ethnic background could effectively work with certain racial and cultural groups. Rather than evaluating her qualifications, he made assumptions based on personal characteristics that had nothing to do with her ability to perform the job. The interview became even more concerning when the director suggested Maria complete a week of unpaid training before she was officially hired. That requirement had never been mentioned in the job posting or in the organization's hiring policies. He also discussed another employee's performance during the interview, which should have remained confidential. By the end of the interview, there were multiple ethical concerns that had nothing to do with Maria's qualifications. Throughout the rest of this presentation, I'll explain why each of those actions was inappropriate and what organizations should do differently. One of the biggest problems with Maria's interview is that many of the questions simply had nothing to do with the position she was applying for. An interview should focus on whether an applicant can successfully perform the essential duties of the job. That means asking about education, previous work experience, professional skills, certifications, problem-solving ability, communication skills, and work availability. Those questions help employers determine whether an applicant is qualified and whether they are a good fit for the position. Questions about marital status, family plans, religion, race, or ethnicity are completely different because they do not measure a person's ability to perform the job. Instead, they introduce personal information that should not influence a hiring decision and can create both ethical and legal concerns. In Maria's case, the director spent time asking questions that were unrelated to the position instead of focusing on her qualifications. That shifted the interview away from a fair evaluation of her abilities and created an environment where personal characteristics appeared to matter more than professional qualifications. Hiring decisions should always be based on merit, experience, and the ability to perform essential functions of the position. Social work is built on relationships, so interpersonal skills are just as important as technical knowledge or academic preparation. One of the most important skills is active listening. Clients need to know they are being heard before they are willing to trust a person trying to help them. Listening carefully also helps social workers understand each client's unique situation before making decisions or developing a plan. Professional communication is another essential skill because social workers communicate with clients, families, supervisors, medical providers, law enforcement, and many other professionals. Being able to communicate respectfully and clearly helps build trust while reducing misunderstandings. Empathy and compassion are equally important. Social workers often work with people who are experiencing trauma, mental health challenges, addiction, poverty, or family crisis. Showing empathy helps build relationships while still maintaining appropriate professional boundaries. I also think cultural humility is an important skill because none of us fully understands another person's experience or background. Every client is different, and we have to be willing to listen, continue learning, and avoid making assumptions based on someone's appearance, culture, or personal beliefs. Finally, teamwork and adaptability are critical because social workers rarely work alone. We work alongside other professionals each day, and situations can change quickly. Being able to work well with others while adapting to new challenges ultimately leads to better outcomes for both clients and the organization. A good hiring process starts with consistency. Every applicant should be evaluated using the same standards and ask the same job-related questions. That doesn't mean every interview has to be identical, but the overall process should be consistent enough that every candidate has the same opportunity to demonstrate their qualification. Structured interviews are one of the best ways to accomplish that because they keep the focus on knowledge, experience, and the ability to perform the job. When interviewers start asking personal questions or making assumptions about applicants, they move away from objective decision making and increase the risk of discrimination. Interviewers should also receive regular training in ethical interviewing, confidentiality, and employment law. Just because someone supervises employees doesn't automatically mean they know how to conduct a professional interview. Organizations have a responsibility to make sure the people making hiring decisions understand both legal requirements and ethical responsibilities. Finally, agencies should have written hiring policies that are applied consistently. Applicants should know what to expect throughout the hiring process, including any required training or onboarding. Nothing like Maria's unpaid trial period should come as a surprise after the interview. Clear policies help protect both the applicant and the organization while creating a more professional hiring process. Maria's interview violated several principles found in the NASW Code of Ethics. The first is respect for the dignity and worth of every person. Throughout the interview, Maria was treated differently because of personal characteristics that had nothing to do with her qualification. Instead of evaluating her fairly, the director made assumptions about her background and future availability. Integrity was another issue. Social workers are expected to act honestly and professionally in every aspect of their work, including hiring. Asking inappropriate questions and suggesting unpaid work that wasn't disclosed beforehand does not demonstrate integrity or transparency. Confidentiality was also violated when the director discussed another employee's performance during the interview. As social workers, we are expected to protect confidential information whenever possible. Sharing personal information about another employee with the job applicant was both unprofessional and unethical. Overall, this interview failed to reflect the ethical leadership that should exist within a social work organization. Leaders set the tone for the workplace, and when ethical standards are ignored during hiring, it raises concerns about how the organization operates as a whole. How could a director with a Christian worldview approach this situation differently? To me, that starts with treating every applicant with dignity and respect. Regardless of someone's background, every person deserves to be treated fairly throughout the hiring process. That means evaluating applicants based on their qualifications instead of making assumptions about their personal lives. A Christian leader should also model honesty, integrity, humility, and accountability. Employees are much more likely to trust leadership when expectations are clear and everyone is held to the same standards. Fairness should never depend on someone's race, religion, family situation, or any other personal characteristic unrelated to the job. Building a culture of teamwork is also important. Employees who feel respected are more likely to support one another, communicate openly, and work together towards the organization's mission. When leaders consistently model ethical behavior, they build confidence not only among employees, but also among the clients and communities they serve. Even though the director handled the interview poorly, it was still important for Maria to remain professional. One option would have been to politely redirect the conversation back to her qualifications. For example, if she was asked about her family plans, she could have responded by explaining that she was fully prepared to meet the responsibilities of the position and then return to discussion to her education or experience. She also could have asked how a particular question related to the essential duties of the job. That allows the interviewer an opportunity to clarify the purpose of the question without creating unnecessary conflict during the interview. After the interview, Maria should document everything that happened while it is still fresh in her memory. Having accurate notes would be important if she decided to report the interview to the organization's leadership or, if necessary, to the appropriate outside agency. Remaining calm and professional throughout the process protects her credibility while still allowing her to address unethical behavior appropriately. The problems in Maria's interview show why organizations need hiring practices that are both ethical and consistent within the law. Having good intentions is important, but organizations also need clear policies that are followed every time someone is interviewed. One way to accomplish that is by using structured interviews. When every applicant is asked the same job-related questions and evaluated using the same criteria, hiring decisions become more consistent and objective. That also makes it easier to explain why one candidate was selected over another based on qualifications rather than personal characteristics. Organizations should also provide regular training for supervisors and managers who participate in hiring. Employment laws change over time, and ethical standards should be reinforced through ongoing education. Leaders should understand what questions are appropriate, how to avoid bias, and how to maintain confidentiality throughout the hiring process. Another important step is documenting hiring decisions. Good documentation helps demonstrate that decisions were based on qualifications and job performance instead of assumptions or personal opinions. It also protects both the applicant and the organization if questions arise later. Finally, organizations should regularly review their hiring policies to make sure they remain consistent with employment law and the NASW Code of Ethics. Ethical hiring should not depend on who is conducting the interview. It should be part of the organization's culture and something every leader is expected to follow. When we look back at Maria's interview, it's clear that there wasn't just one ethical problem, there were several, and together they created an interview process that was both unfair and unprofessional. The director asked personal questions that were unrelated to the position, questioned Maria's ability to work within certain client populations because of her background, suggested unpaid work before employment, and discussed confidential information about another employee. Any one of those issues would be concerning by itself. Seeing all of them happen during the same interview suggests a much larger problem within the organization's hiring process. These actions could expose the organization to complaints, legal liability, and damage to its reputation. Just as important, they could discourage qualified applicants from wanting to work there. Organizations that fail to hire ethnically often struggle to build trust with employees and that can eventually affect the quality of services provided to clients. This case is a reminder that every interview is an opportunity to demonstrate professionalism, fairness, and respect. The hiring process is often an applicant's first impression of an organization, and leaders should make sure that impressions reflect the organization's values. As I wrap this up, I think Maria's interview provides a good reminder that ethical hiring starts long before someone becomes an employee. The interview itself should reflect the same professional standards that we expect social workers to demonstrate every day. Hiring decisions should always focus on qualifications, experience, and the ability to perform the responsibilities of the position. Personal characteristics that have nothing to do with the job should never influence those decisions. Organizations also have a responsibility to protect confidentiality, follow employment law, and make sure every applicant is treated fairly throughout the hiring process. As future social workers and leaders, we'll all have the opportunities to influence the culture of the organizations where we work. Whether we're interviewing applicants, supervising employees, or eventually managing programs, we have a responsibility to lead with integrity and professionalism. When organizations hire ethnically, they build stronger teams, create healthier workplaces, and are ultimately better able to serve the population who depend on them. Thank you for taking the time to listen to my presentation.